I've made these two different types of journal using items that I made in my last video, which I'll link. And this one's a fabric one, and this one's made of paper and card. But what they do have in common is that they're both refillable. This one, I'm using a series of elastic threads, top and bottom, so I can just slip notebooks in and out of them. And this one, I'm using these individual binder rings. So I've put a lot of my samples in as a portfolio, but if I ever want to add more or take them out, you just have to unclip these. I think I got slightly too big ones. They come in all different sizes and colours, and they work just like the ones you get in files, but they're individual. And I think that's quite a good way of keeping things. You don't have to have as many as this. You could just have one at the top, but let me show you how I made them. So this is my fabric that you might have seen in my last video, and I've done this pattern on my digital machine of the branches. I've also put my logo on the back, and now I'm filling in all the spaces with some free machine embroidery. And the reason I'm doing that is it makes a really dense, robust type of fabric, which will be ideal for this cover. And I've made a sandwich of the top fabric and a coordinating fabric for the lining, and I've put a layer of felt in between just to give it a bit of bulk. And of course you don't have to quilt, it's just that I like to do it to add a bit of density. You can use regular fabric and sandwich it and just hem the edges, or if you don't want to do any sewing at all, you could use one of the fabrics like felt that doesn't fray, and then you just need to cut out your shape, and that would work absolutely fine as well. So then when I finished, I just had to trim off some of the ends to make it nice and neat on both the outside and the inside, because I'm always a bit fussy about the other side of quilts as well, because people might look at them or something. But I like to do them in quite a neat way. I then wanted to measure it and cut it out, and I'm actually replacing an old one I already had that I never really liked particularly, but I'm following the same size. I'm not going to have both those pockets. I'm just going to have one corner one at the back because I don't really use the square one. So I just measured it out and cut it out, and I'll put the measurements below. This is if you're doing for A5 booklets, but obviously you can do whatever size you like, make it smaller or bigger. And for the pocket I used another print, I think it was a signer type I already had, and I just ironed it onto some interfacing and turned it over and placed it in the corner. I'm using a coordinating piece of my hand-dyed fabric to make a binding with. Again, you don't have to do this because it's sewn right to the edge, it's not going to fray, but I'm used to doing this with my quilts that go on the wall, and I think it makes a nice sort of neat look. Plus it makes it a little bit more hard wearing. So you just stitch it onto one side and miter the corners, and then I turn over and it's just a hemming stitch to make a nice neat edge on the inside. I made eyelets with my sewing machine at the top and bottom, but I just thought I'd show you how to put a metal one in. You just have to pierce a hole in the fabric. You sometimes have to cut off a little bit extra so that the ring will fit through. That's what I'm doing here. Because I've got the felt in between the fabric, there's quite a bit of bulk, so I had to cut a bit away. Then these eyelet kits come with both the metal parts and a little tool. So you just put the deeper part from the outside. I have to coax the fabric down a bit here. You then put the collar on top that goes round it. And then with a special tool that comes with it, you just need a hammer and you tap it. It's actually quite a satisfying thing to do. So you could do that for all the holes, or this one is just so that I can put a bit of elastic to make a closure. In the end, I didn't really like the black. It looked too harsh against the other colours, but it's all I had. But I'm going to get a more colourful piece. So you just have to knot it so that it stays there. So I've got myself a big blunt end needle, darning needle, I think it's sometimes called a bodkin, which is a lovely word. And my elastic is just over 1.60 m if you want to do similar to me. So I'm going to take the first one through the middle and then to one side. And I'm going to be tying it off somewhere in the middle, so I need a long enough tail. Then you go up to the top. Through the next one. And you don't want to pull it too tight because it will make it curl round. So just sort of tight enough to keep tautish. Go back through the middle. Up through one side. And then you just go round again, so that I want to have two, so I can put 6 individual leaflets or booklets. I want to have double on each one. So round again, and then you come back through the middle, and then you can tie it. I've probably got a little bit too much there, but I might just pull it up a bit. So this is kind of the right tension. You don't want it to be pulling the top and bottom over. So all you have to do is tie a knot, and you can go around. I'm sure there are fancier knots you could do, but there's only no granny knots. And then you get your books. And I'm going to be using this as a garden diary, and I'm definitely going to write down all the seeds I plant this year. I say this every year. And I've got this, I think they call it an undated planner, because it has got very faint writing. It has got days of the week and numbers of the month at the top. So it means you can start, so even if you want to keep it as a proper diary, you can just ring the day of the day and the week and the month that you want and fill it like that. But I know that I don't keep these things as regularly as I'd like to, so I thought it would be good to have the option, and I can just use it as a regular notebook. What's quite important is to get what they call a lay flat, and then you'll be able to use it then you'll be able to use it like this and write in it more comfortably. So I'm going to put that in the middle one because it's the biggest. And then I've got a few old notebooks. I've got some seed lists that I've kept a bit, and some other things, bulbs and dahlias, that sort of thing. So I'm going to put those in the other ones. I think I'll put 2 at the back. So because I've got 2, I can put them in separately. And I am going to try and keep this up, and if I do keep this up, see, look, there's where I laid out my dahlias last year and lilies, that sort of thing. And if I do use it regularly, I promise that I will do an update later in the year to prove that I am using it. So if you can see now, if you have it too taut, and I might have done it a little bit, it's going to pull those bits over. So I might have to readjust it, but you can see it makes a good cover, and then you've got the elastic band to keep it nice and neat. And I think the fact that it's quite eye-catching means that it will be harder for me to ignore. So that's my fabric journal. This is how I made what I'm calling a portfolio. And to make the cover, I used the branch image that I transferred using the commercial kind of sort of, they call it transfer paper, but it's more like film because it's got this slight plasticky finish, which I don't really like on clothes, but actually for this sort of thing where you want it to be protective, it's ideal. Now, I cut it out first and then glued it to some card. In retrospect, it would have been much better to have glued it first and then trimmed it afterwards. I would have got a better finish, but I thought I'd include that because we all make mistakes, but we learn from them, don't we? I then put some masking tape around all the edges just to kind of, again, to keep it neat, and I thought it would help reinforce the edges, especially the one that I'm going to put holes in. I then trimmed it to size and I stacked up some of the pages that I wanted to put in from the beginning, and I also used another piece of cardboard for the back just to make it a bit more robust. I measured out where I wanted to put the holes. You can use as many or as few as you want, just it's a good idea that they're equidistant so it all looks quite neat. I then used a clip to keep the stack together and stable while I used a hole punch to make the holes. I used this one, it is actually a leather hole punch, so it's quite a strong one, but you could definitely just use a normal paper one. You just might not be able to do many pages at a time. So I hope you found that clear enough how to make them. Do ask any questions and I'll put the sizes, the dimensions of the fabric I used. And just to say, just because I quilted it like this, you don't have to do that. You could just use a thick piece of felt or any other sort of fabric that, if you don't want to do any sewing, something that wouldn't fray would work equally well. And I think this system has got lots of potential. I only came across these when I was doing a bit of browsing, and I'm sure I'll come back to these because I just love the idea of refillable folders. So I hope you enjoyed watching that. Thank you very much for watching and see you again soon.